Okay, so this is log one, I guess, in my little series of me documenting my life and stuff like that. So this is video number one on the date of March 18th, 2025. So we'll start off by saying that I was inspired by this guy who I saw on my YouTube recommendations. I've been getting a lot of cool recommendations recently on YouTube. This guy had about 500 subscribers. His videos were averaging around 1,000 views, so a pretty relatively unknown guy I just saw randomly. And he basically was documenting his everyday life, and his ultimate goal was becoming a real life Bruce Wayne. And it really resonated with me because not only was he doing this, I don't want to say he was doing it for nobody. I mean, there were definitely viewers, but it was kind of more like he was just putting videos out to put them out, and it kind of inspired me to do the same because I'd been seeing a reoccurring theme where I kept getting recommended videos like that, and they always really interested me because it was kind of like an insight into that person's into their psyche, their brain, how their brain worked. So yeah, so I guess I'll start doing the same. Another thing that inspired me by that guy was his ultimate goal of becoming a real-life Bruce Wayne. It kind of resonated with me because he made a very interesting point that Bruce had no real superpowers, and Bruce's character is powerful due to his hard work, his extreme intelligence, and having a plan for everything. And I think that's something that everyone can model their life around. So Bruce basically reached peak mental and physical performance, and that's something I would love to replicate in my life. And he also was extremely wealthy and philanthropic, which is, or philanthropic is the way you pronounce that. And that's something I would love to replicate in my life as well, in the future, hopefully in the near future. Moving on, I have my notes right in front of me so I don't lose my train of thought. I'm very good at going off on a tangent, so it's good for me to write this stuff down so I can come back to it for these videos. So starting off with now my own stuff, my note-taking workflow has significantly improved, specifically with Obsidian. So it's no secret that if you talk to me for a little bit, that I will probably eventually start nerding out over Obsidian. It's not an open source, but it's a free note-taking app that's very, very flexible. Many different theming options, many different. It's hyperlinked. It's very awesome. I love it. I don't want to go on off with the tangent here, explaining everything, but it's easy to get lost in the complexity of Obsidian. I most definitely was lost in this complexity when I first started note-taking on the app, but eventually I nailed down a workflow that worked for me. And once you find something that works for you, you just get going with that and you iterate as you go on. So I've been adding a lot of notes recently to my Obsidian workflow, specifically in the cognition area. Actually, let me go to that real quick just so I can read it off to you. I've been adding a lot of stuff to my cognition area, specifically on building my memory and becoming just a successful person in the future. Stuff like raising my IQ, learning really hard subjects, becoming resilient. That's something I'll touch upon later. Things like that. So I think it's really cool that I've kind of nailed down my Obsidian workflow, and I've been doing really good on managing that. But I would also like to say that as a result, I feel like my handwriting has significantly suffered, or maybe it's just something that I've never really had that good of a handwriting. You can ask a lot of people I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school with. I didn't really have the best handwriting. But I don't know. It kind of came to me one day. I don't know why, out of nowhere. I was just like, man, I have really bad handwriting. That's something that I can improve upon. So I've been kind of, trying to take better physical notes and working really deliberately on my handwriting. And I feel like it's been pretty successful, even with just one day of practice. And I'm sure with time, as everything works, and I'll just get better with practice. But touching back on the subject of my note-taking, I kind of have a hypothesis that I'm having some memory retention issues with my notes due to what I'm calling large language model information relegation. It's kind of a mouthful, but basically what I've been doing as a part of my workflow recently is I've been finding a lot of YouTube videos that have been recommended to me that are like 15 minutes plus that I don't really have the time to sit down and really like digest the information in. And another one of my personal theories is that a lot of YouTube videos kind of stretch their time for making ad marks. So I have this whole system prompt in my notes that basically just extracts the most important information from every video. So I'll like 10 videos that I think are interesting, and I'll shove them into my Python script that I've written. And it basically just transcribes all the videos, extracts the important information from it, and then I'll go through and read those notes individually and then put them back in my Obsidian vault, and then I'll review them. But because I'm not the one writing the notes, in a sense, it's more like me reading a textbook. So while I'm kind of keeping the information in my brain, I'm more kind of just relegating it to my vault and just saying, there you go. Like it's in my vault and I can come back to it later. So some things that I've kind of thought about to combat this, first of all, is just starting to write things down physically that I think are maybe just important. There was a study done by researchers at Princeton and UCLA. It was a kind of a famous research that they found links basically between handwriting your notes and committing information to memory. So the researchers kind of just they found out that the act of writing requires more active brain participation in the note-taking process compared to typing. So it kind of leads to different. It's very different when you write things down. Your brain kind of has different ways of connecting that into your memory. So because I'm not doing a lot of writing, I'm doing a lot of typing in my vault, I've come up with a couple of solutions, I think, and I feel like they've been working. The first of them is just active recall, and I took notes on that, funnily enough, so I'll go through and read them right now. Stuff like passive methods like reading notes, highlighting in lectures, or in my case, the large language model information relegation, it results in weak memory retention. So information fades quickly unless it's actively engaged with. So active recall is a method that strengthens your memory by actively retrieving information from the brain. So things like your visual processing, your word interpretation, and your memory storage. So much like working out, which I love doing, you also have to work out your brain. It's kind of like a muscle, right? So you just kind of have to reviewing stuff. So there's many different methods. The first method that I took notes on was the questions workflow, which is you learn your concept, you write notes on it, and you create questions based off of your notes. And while I think that is kind of a good workflow, it's not one that really works well with my brain. I feel like every brain works differently. And this one is not one that works. It's like the flashcard methods. It just doesn't work for me. Spaced repetition is the next one, and that one kind of works with me. I have a plugin on my Obsidian Vault that is called the Simple Note Review plugin. And basically when I'm kind of like bored, not really doing anything, and I'm just on my phone, I'll head over to my Obsidian Vault on my phone because I have it on my app, and I'll just start doing every note that I have the review tag on. I'll just start flipping through them and reviewing the important ones, and then I'll start flipping through random ones and start reading them and going like, oh, I remember this one, and then just keep going, stuff like that. That one works because it combines active recall with memory retention with kind of like a timing thing. I don't really know how that one works. But the one that works the most for me is being able to speak out loud, which is part of the reason why I'm recording this video, and also writing stuff out on a whiteboard. Or pretending to teach concepts to imaginary students. That one's called the Feynman technique, and I went and researched on that one too. But basically, you just pretend like you're a teacher and you're explaining something to somebody. It helps your brain kind of fill in the gaps or identify gaps that you don't know, and you can go back and review and simplify and learn more so you can better explain it. The practice question method on the active recall doesn't really work well for me. So mainly it's just creating the sensory pathways and also the repetition. So those are two methods that I've been using, and they've been working quite well. Another reason why I want to start writing more is probably also because I kind of like the tactile feeling of just writing stuff down. It makes me feel like I'm, cool, and I'm like, I'm studious, some shit like that. So, and I also just like how it is. I think it's awesome. Maybe just because I'm a nerd. Let's see what's next on my notes here. I already went on that. So I might invest on some pocket notebooks that I just kind of carry around with me in my backpack or my back pocket or something. And whenever something interesting comes down, I just write it down. I saw this recommended by a YouTuber. I thought it was a very interesting technique. Maybe I'll try it out. But my brain kind of like goes. It just goes and goes. And sometimes I think of stuff that's really interesting, and then I forget it like 5 seconds later. So I think this is a method that'll it'll work really well for me, because that's just the way my brain works. I can just write down things that manifest within my consciousness so that they just aren't forgotten. There was a book that was also recommended to me called Inner Work by Robert A. Johnson. Someone recommended me that online. It supposedly goes into the subject more detailed. I'm thinking of reading that book next, after the previous book that I just read called Flow. And that's a great segue. I'll just start reading on that part. So I read this book called Flow by, I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. It's called Malay something. I don't know. But it's called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And it was a very, very long-winded book, in my opinion. It went over a lot of topics that I feel like didn't really relate to the subject matter too much. But at the end of the day, I got what I needed out of it. And I highlighted a lot of the stuff that I thought was interesting. And I'll read back to those now. So the first excerpt that I highlighted that I wanted to go over was something I called like living in the moment, where it basically said the most important step in emancipating oneself from social controls is the ability to find rewards in the events of each moment. So the ability to find reward in the events of each moment. So no matter what you're doing in your life, whether it be you're just going on a walk, you're in a boring lecture, or if you're working on a really hard project, commonly, and this might be like me, don't think of it like me as like, oh, these other people, like look at these losers, but kind of something that I've been seeing a lot more recently is a lot of people have been like complaining about like suffering and doing classwork, suffering, I hate going to the gym because it hurts, or I hate doing this, and I don't want to be that person, but like I used to be that person like a long time ago when I was like probably like a freshman, sophomore in high school. I used to be that kind of person, and even before that in my life. But you need to be able to find rewards in the events of each moment. Like you can't just go by and be like complaining all the time. Like you need to like sit down and be like, I need to get this done, but like also find it sort of rewarding. Like you need to like be able to extract out of it. Like, oh, I'm going to the gym and it hurts, but why am I here? I'm here to get stronger, right? I don't want to like look over my notes every day, but why am I doing it? I want to get smarter. I don't want to do this classwork. Why am I doing it? Because I want to get good jobs so I can get good grades, and and it keeps going, right? And to continue the quote, if a person learns to enjoy and find meaning on an ongoing stream of experience, the process of living itself and the burden of social controls automatically falls from one's shoulders. So power returns to the person when rewards are no longer relegated to outside forces. So I think that's a very interesting point to make. If you learn to basically enjoy every part of life, you're going to be a much happier person. And also, like the power returns to you when you're not letting external forces kind of like be forced upon you. So like, if you're saying, oh, I don't want, like, the system is against me, like, I'm working on this classwork because I need to get good grades because my stupid job, they look at your grades and that's just a part of the system. Like, if you just forget about all that stuff and you're like, oh, I'm actually learning, like, this stuff to become better, like, to show that, oh, why is this system like this? It wants to be able to show that you're accountable and you could do the work. So it's like, okay, like, now that's out of it. Now it's all about me again. Like, it needs to be about you in your own life. So, like, in the kind of a way, you need to be your own main character. The next point that I wanted to go over was another excerpt kind of about choosing a goal and doing it 100%. So it goes, when we choose a goal and we invest ourselves in it to the limits of our concentration, that's an important point, Whatever we do will be enjoyable. And once we have tested this joy, we will redouble our efforts and taste it again. This is the way the self grows. And that makes me think of a feedback loop, right? Like, if you push yourself to your limit, like 100%, like let's say you were going to the gym and you were going like, 50% because it kind of hurt too much to go 100%. And then you were like, okay, I'm doing these bicep curls and I know I can go further, but I'm just kind of like, nah, I don't really feel like it today, so I'm just going to like do this and go home. But then one day you were like, okay, wait, but I remember reading this paper that said, oh, you need to go at least 80% or higher to achieve muscle growth. So you're like, okay, I'll do 2 reps in reserve today. And then you'll do it, and then you go home after doing that for like a week. You look in the mirror and you're like, oh shit, dude, my biceps are getting bigger. That is your tasting the joy. And you will then double your efforts. Next week you're going to go to the gym like, all right, this time I'm going to up weight and do progressive overload even though it hurts, and I'm going to do the same thing. And then you're going to get even bigger, and you're going to be like, holy shit. And it's going to just keep going and going and going, and you're like, oh my God, I'm massive. That's exactly what's happening, and you can apply that to anything. Like with this note-taking stuff and me wanting to get smarter and increase my intelligence, at first it was really slow. At first I was like, why am I doing this? This is dumb. And then I was like, wait a second. I'm the one who was dumb. And doing all this over and over, I realized I was getting more intelligent. I was getting comments from my classmates being like, oh my God, Jack, you're so smart. And I was like, okay, wait, this is actually like working. Like, I started tasting it and I needed more. So now I'm like trying to get even smarter. Like, it's a feedback loop. I mean, obviously just like any feedback loop or any, like, you can't let it like go out of control, but you need to like, keep it under control. And the next point was unself-conscious assurance. So if one operates with unself-conscious assurance and remains open to the environment and involved in it, a solution is likely to emerge. So this goes to another point which I feel like has been really significant to me recently, is kind of being able to be good under pressure. So this is a trait that I've always had throughout my life, and I feel like it's one of the most important traits that anyone can like have. And I do think it's a trait that you can gain. But some people, just like anything in life, some people are inherently better already with something, and other people need to kind of like work there to get to a certain point. That's just how it is. But I feel like for me, I've always been good under pressure. And specifically when I'm stuck in this horrible situation, like let's say I'm stranded in the middle of nowhere, no car, and I got no food, no water. And most people would start panicking and be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then like someone like me, I mean, the more rationally you think in a situation like that, it's funny, the better the solution is going to be. It's like, okay, let's stop. Like, where's the nearest blank? Where's the nearest convenience store? If I'm thirsty and hungry, I'll go grab food there. And I don't have any money in my wallet, so I'll probably just walk to the nearest subway station. I don't know where the nearest subway station is. I'll ask. I'll find it. And then I'll walk there. And then I'll eventually get to where I need to go, right? A situation like that, thinking rationally is the most important thing to do. And that applies to anything. Like, a solution will likely emerge if you remain open to the environment and involved in it. So instead of like hiding away, like I need to think of a better example. Think of it like you have really bad grades. And I did this last semester actually, I had a really bad calculus grade because I forgot to do a bunch of homework because it was on a different website. Long story. But basically, I forgot to do my homework. I had a really bad grade. I had like a D. And even though I got a good grade on all the tests, and instead of hiding, or in the very beginning I was hiding from it, I was like, okay, my grade will eventually go up after these tests, right? But I kept trying to hide from it, like go away, and it just stayed there. Like my grade stayed bad, even though I was doing good on tests. The homework was really weighted, so I was like, okay, I need to do something. So I became open to the environment and involved in it, and I went out, I asked my professor, is there anything I can do? He gave me partial credit on a lot of my assignments, and he gave me extra credit if I did my assignments early. So I did future assignments early, turned in most of my late work that I was eligible for, and I got my grade up to a C+. And I passed the class. So that's an example. You need to remain open in the environment, and that also applies, I feel like, for problem solving. Like one time I was debugging a code, and it just wouldn't work no matter what debugging I did. I even went to a Claude and was like shoving into Claude, like Claude help me. Claude couldn't help. So I was like, oh my God, this is like the worst thing ever. I need to like restructure my whole code. This sucks. This bug won't go away. And then I realized I had to restructure some of my code, and I didn't want to because it was going to take a lot of work. But then I was closed. But then once again, I opened back up to the environment. I was like, okay, realistically, if I restructure my code right now or refactor it, down the line, I'll be better off. I'm just putting off work because I don't want to do work. So then I did it. My solution emerged. My life became better. So I feel like it can be applied to a lot of stuff. And another thing that this book talked about a lot, I didn't really have any specific quotes for this. It was just a reoccurring topic that I kept seeing, was kind of the gamification of life, where you can't think of life as this like thing that you need to like just plow through. Like, I'm a guy who's living and I need to do this stuff. Like, oh, I need to do this task. Like, oh, okay, then I need to do this task. Then I need to do this task. And you can't go through life thinking, okay, I'm a task-oriented person. I need to do these tasks, and it's hard and it sucks and I don't want to, but I need to do the task to live. You need to instead, I mean, I'm a huge nerd. I love video games. So I want to put it in a video game perspective. Like, you need to think of yourself as the main character. And the main character in a game has an end goal. Like, what is that end goal for you? Like, okay, for me, it'd probably be to be really smart, really rich and wealthy, and having a great family. Probably something like that. That's your end quest. So everything else in the middle is something that you need to do to get to that end point, right? So now you are a main character, and anything that's thrown at you is like, that's an obstacle. Like, you need to, like, I don't know, jump over the obstacle, or plow through it, or dig under it, or find your way around the obstacle. But everything in life is a challenge to be accepted. Like, you need to be able to accept this challenge. Think of it like Elden Ring. I mean, or a Dark Souls, or a Souls-like game. Like, I love those games so much because it teaches you a valuable life lesson. And that is that you can be fighting a boss, and this is like a really hard boss. In the beginning, you're going to suck. You're going to die a lot. But over time, you're going to learn the boss's moveset, and you're going to get better. And eventually, you're going to beat the boss's ass. And that's basically how life works. You're going to get something that's really hard in the beginning, and you're going to suck. But over time, you're going to get better. And this book actually even talks about that. Once you get to that midpoint where it's not too hard, you become in the flow state, and you start like just flowing, and you know every boss's move. You know that you anticipate the move. You see the way that the boss is about to swing his sword, and you anticipate that, and you get the timing right every time. It gets to the point where you're not even thinking about it anymore. You're just dodging everything, and you just know the way that it's going to go. The book covers that subject actually in excruciating detail, and actually I'm going to share my screen now just so you can see what I'm talking about. I threw it on the flow map. So when you start off in the game, you're probably going to be somewhere in here in A3, which is your anxiety. So you're going to be here like, oh, this boss is super hard, or let's put this even in a life context. You're going to be saying something like, oh, I'm just learning how to play tennis, and I don't know how to even hold the racket. I don't know how to do anything. You're going to be up here. But then eventually, when you realize how to hold the racket and hit the ball over the thing or over the net, you're going to be probably somewhere in here. You're going to be having fun. Then you're going to be in flow. And you can move to A2 if you get bored, and it's the same easy thing over and over. Or you get anxious because soon you're like, okay, I can play my friend who plays tennis, and he's really good. And then he starts beating your ass, and you're like, oh my God, now I suck. That is when the challenge is too high. But eventually, you can either practice or continue playing that friend. So in this Elden Ring case, you could keep playing that boss and learn his moves, and eventually you're moving to A4. And that's when you're back in a flow, when the challenge is high, but you've also like raised your skill ceiling, so now you're here in A4. I think that's a very valuable thing that I learned from this book as well. I will now stop sharing my screen, and I've realized that my hair has been messed up this entire time. That's very encouraging. I'm glad that I've been chopped for this whole video. That's fantastic. Well, continuing on my notes and my rambling spree. And there's just two more things that I'd like to talk about to close out this video. Thing number one is my baseball coach for my summer ball team used to say something all the time whenever we were doing bad, and that was bend, don't break. And that's a very simple saying, but it's a very important saying because, back in the Elden Ring sense, like if the boss is beating your ass, you can't just give up and be like, all right, well, I guess I suck. You need to be able to bend but not break. or the tennis. Like if your friend is beating you in tennis, you can't be like, well, I guess I suck at tennis. You got to go practice or keep playing them until eventually you get to the point where you can like fight against them and be good. And one more point that I wanted to talk about. Funnily enough, it's a quote from Shaquille O'Neal that really resonated with me. He said, if the general doesn't panic, the troops don't panic. And that's a very valuable piece of advice, especially if you're working in teams, where I was doing a lab in my class, and we did one part of the lab wrong, and everyone started freaking out but me. And I was like, guys, like, all we have to do is just go back and do like this section of the lab again. Like, it's no big deal. Probably gonna take us 10 minutes tops. I like wrangled them together, and then we did that part. And then like later they were like, oh, I don't know how you stayed so calm. And I was like, dude, it was like not that big of a deal. Like, you just gotta like, once again, you just gotta think rationally in a situation like that. You need to, you can't relegate that stuff to outside forces, just like what I said from that book. And when the general doesn't panic, the troops don't panic, right? Like, they all got like much calmer. They all stopped freaking out when they realized. I was like, okay, guys, we just lock in and do this one part. Like, it was a simple thing, but I just thought that was interesting. So, all right, well, I think that's gonna close it out for this first log. Hopefully it went well and didn't corrupt video or anything. It's looking good. All right, goodbye.